Hey, David Brewster here with another episode of Chordplay, and this is the chords of Randy Rhoads. And Randy Rhoads obviously is a monumental guitar legend. He's up there with really all the greats. You know, when you hear people talking about, Hendrix and Van Halen, and they start throwing names around, Randy comes up constantly. He really is one of those players that people just constantly speculate, just like Hendrix. What would Randy Rhoads have done? And there's already a lot of documentation that he wasn't really that happy with Ozzy. I mean, the crazy rock and roll lifestyle really wasn't Randy Rhoads at all. Now Ozzy, on the other hand, Ozzy was like built for, a rock and roll party. But I think, honestly, my personal opinion, and I'm sure, somebody's going to disagree or throw out, alternate Randy Rhoads, possibilities as far as where his life may have gone. But I think if he would have survived Ozzy, if he would have survived the tour, like the Diary of the Madman tour, he would have left Ozzy's band, possibly studied classical guitar somewhere. Not really sure where he was thinking, as far as going to school. But I think he would have pursued that, and then he basically would have just exploded as like a composer, music producer, with this, history of playing with Ozzy Osbourne in his past. So I think, honestly, in my mind, if I dream of where Randy Rhoads might have gone, I like to think of him leaving Ozzy's band, studying classical music and, classical guitar and composition, leaving school and becoming like a rock and roll, like John Williams, like the film composer, not the classical guitarist. But there's definitely a lot you can learn from studying Randy Rhoads', guitar style, whether it's, his rhythm style and the chords and progressions that he played, or if it's his lead style and the scales and licks and ideas, he did melodically. But he always, had something really interesting going on. The first riff here is from Steal Away the Night, which was on Blizzard of Oz. And, I've always loved this riff, and it's unusual, and it's based around fourths. Basically, he's targeting, like little two-note fourth dyads, which in rock guitar, I mean, that's been around for a long time. In Steal Away the Night, it's really cool because he's using and targeting fourths, but he's also moving this bass note around. So there's a lot of movement and activity, in this guitar part, which is cool. So it's kind of loosely based around like a B minor 7, which, like, jazz or funk or, other guitarists might play it more like that. But what he's doing is he's playing with, a partial E, dyad and a partial D dyad. So if you think of power chords, we're just getting rid of the root and we're just kind of playing with those little two-note shapes right there on the D and the G string. But then he's also moving between, a B and a C sharp on the low E. So it's almost like he's kind of doing this back and forth, kind of alternating motion. So that's a badass guitar riff. From that E shape, and then he walks up, B to C sharp, and then he grabs that partial D shape there. So he's doing this little back and forth movement. And then he kind of does the same thing with a C, kind of. And there you can see he kind of moves down to the low E to grab the G and the A notes there. And then just a few power chords, slid around. Next riff is from the song Sato, or S-A-T-O, from Diary of a Madman. And this is another interesting kind of rockin', guitar riff from Randy Rhoads. Sato has this cool kind of ringing, open string, power chord kind of mixture going. So the progression kind of moves between E, C, A, and B. But he's using like a kind of an open, E power chord. So like it's a big E5. And then a C major 7, if you leave the B and the high E open on a C power chord, it's a C major 7. And then he moves to like an A sus2, an open position. And then just a B power chord. But it's this really cool. If I just break that down a little bit further, we're just using open-ended power chords. We talked about that in a few episodes of Chordplay already. So we're playing power chords, but they're open-ended, right? With those open strings. The same thing with C. Same thing with A. He kind of hits like an A power chord and then the sus chord. And then it's just a B power chord. There's no open-ended chord, for B. And then Randy, really was such a master at mixing, rhythm parts that were chord-based, and then he would throw in these little single-note riffs and melodic fills, and so interesting. And he would weave between chords and single notes constantly. So, learning some of his music and kind of working through some of the transcriptions and things, you may notice, like, wow, he was back and forth like a magician, And a lot of guitarists, they'll lock into chords and then they'll take a break for a solo and play, some single notes. Or maybe they'll throw like a couple little single note runs or something somewhere, but then the rest of it, they just lock into chords. But with Randy, he was like a wild horse just running around, grabbing chords, grabbing fills, doing all these crazy, things with harmonics and these neat noises and stuff, toggling the toggle switch and stuff like that. Just doing these really cool tricks, in his music. Randy was such a great master of mixing chords and single note riffs and melodic runs together. So in that song, after he runs through the chord part first, then he just does this little 3-note, single note kind of E minor based run. And kind of substitutes that for the chord, which is cool. Like your ear is expecting this, because that's what he started with. And then you hear that instead. He gets to the C power chord, he just flirts with the flat 5. And then the A and the B are played pretty much the same. But really cool. Well, now we're going to tap a little bit into Randy's classical influences and style and approach to chords. And the first thing we're going to look at, we're not going to look at D, unfortunately, in this lesson, mainly because D has also had a lot of coverage and transcriptions in magazines. So I'm attempting to go a little deeper than just the average, kind of Randy Rhoads lesson. So sorry, no Crazy Train, sorry, no D, and Flying High Again, and Mr. Crowley, but I'm sorry, those songs have been covered hundreds, if not thousands of times over the years. But Revelation Mother Earth, has been mentioned and it's been, shown in magazines and online, but it's not as common. So I'm attempting to be a little different, I guess. But the big thing here, I guess, to learn from Randy and, what he kind of approached and learned from classical music, it's very different than, say, Yngwie. Yngwie approached, people like Paganini and Bach, and he studied a lot of violinists, phrasing and arpeggios and movement. Randy didn't really focus on that. He focused in a different area of classical music. And, he studied classical guitar. So he was listening to Carcassi and Giuliani and Fernando Sor and people like that. With Revelation Mother Earth, he's really hinting at an E minor 7 and a B major 7. And the B major 7 also kind of hints at a flat 9 tonality for a second. So the melody sounds something like that, but then he fills it out in a classical guitar kind of fingerstyle manner like this. Something like that. Then it moves to G, to D. And then he does this really cool, like A minor 6, A minor, and then an F sharp minor 6 to E minor. So that's very classical, classically influenced. That's kind of very Baroque sounding, almost cadence, right? Bring your padded wigs. It's a beautiful guitar part. Last example here comes from Diary of a Madman, which is on the album from the same name. And this is an obvious classical guitar influence. It has this very, almost kind of Spanish or flamenco sounding, chord arrangement, these haunting chords that you hear. And it starts off with this A sharp 11, which is fingered in a very interesting and cool way. So I'm just going to play through the part and then I'll break the chords down so you can check it out. And really what Randy's doing there, it's an interesting little progression, a sequence of chords. There's like an A sharp 11, and then an A7 sharp 11, just by dropping, the A note down to a G right there. And then an A diminished 7. And then a D minor 6 over A, which is really cool. And I like how that chord just kind of moves down, it has the, part of the fingering moves down. Really cool. And then an A major 9, and then an A minor 9, and then an A minor 9 over G, which is really cool. And then this is a D minor add 9 over F, and then an E major 9. So really cool sequence of chords. Another chord that I want to show you, this little kind of interchange that happens in Diary of a Madman. There's this E minor add 9 that he finds, and we actually started the Chordplay series looking at this chord with Pink Floyd. But he's not using that fingering. He's found this alternate fingering a lot higher on the fretboard. And it has this very spooky, haunting sound. And that's so cool. And then he basically raises the fifth. He raises that B to a B sharp, which is really cool. And you can also think of that as the flat 6 too, or a C. And you can think of that related to open position. It's the same as moving, the B note to C right there. So it's really cool. Really unusual chord too, but I like it. That's going to wrap up this look at the chords of Randy Rhoads, and I've already had a request for a Randy Rhoads 3 for All, so I'll try to make sure to put that out as soon as I can. But this is really just skimming the surface. There is so much more you can learn from Randy Rhoads just by kind of diving into his music and studying some of his habits and techniques and ideas that he unlocked and used in his music. Very interesting and inspiring guitarist for sure, because he was coming from a rock direction, he was coming from a classical direction, and he just started mixing all of these different sounds and approaches together. And for most rock and metal guitarists at the time, it was groundbreaking, because he was taking things that he learned from Michael Schenker and Gary Moore and some other guitarists, and just redirected them in a different way and kind of gave it a different style and sound, which is so so cool. So anyway, please leave some feedback and some comments, and subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back with some more lessons and content before you know it. Thank you.